world. Hello, friends. Welcome to the
Hello, Marta.
very first episode of what is planned as a series of conversations under the title of De-Gov Studio. And the idea is that we'll have discussions, battles, conversations, polite battles, and everything else that belongs to the realm of democratic sense making, and figuring out of ideas. Everything focused on the concept of the decentralization of governance. Decentralization is a broader topic and phenomenon, and governance as well. So this is the intersection: governance, decentralization, and all about that. We hope eventually to unpack in our meetings. As you see, we have a timer. We just had a short democratic process of deciding if we keep the timer or not. We decided to do it. So the format of 55 minutes at a time, focus on different topics of decentralization of governance. And thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be in the very first call and very first recording. And I hope you'll keep coming back, and that we'll do it together, opening the floor for other voices, other faces, but also coming back enough that we develop some shared understanding together. Let me introduce who has showed up today for our first time. So I decided I will go in the order of seniority, introducing you, for which I had to Google some dates of birth, but the winner is Michel. So Michel, you have to act the senior here for this call. Michel Bauwens. And your Wikipedia page calls you the cyber philosopher, which is a very cool specialization, cyber philosopher. You are the founder of the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, which is a legendary foundation that instilled the understanding of peer-to-peer economy, development, culture in the world. So by now it's a very well-known flagship and a point and a flag in this in this realm. So your foundation is busy with research and know-how, and but also you are an entrepreneur. So it's not only theory; it's also a lot of practice in different projects. And we happen to be colleagues at the Center Leo Apostel for Interdisciplinary Studies at the Free University of Brussels. So there is also a connection here. Yeah, we haven't met that much, so kind of fresh colleagues. But I already understand that you are a person who knows everybody and everything about everything. So this is my perception. Why you are here? Really everybody and everything. Yes, and also has read everything about everything. Yes, so this is this is you, Michel. And in the order of seniority, also let me introduce Weaver. We've met at the same center in Brussels, the University of Brussels, and you are also a philosopher. And your denomination, I wouldn't call it probably cyber philosopher. I don't know what we will call yourself. But if I was to kind of nickname the type of philosophy that you are doing, is some interesting blend of complexity and cognition and metaphysics, but in one gestalt. Yes, so this is metaphysics of complexity. Yes, and probably cybernetics also belongs there. We have met at this center in Brussels, where it was called the Global Brain Institute, and this is, I suppose, relevant also for you, Yip, because you are describing your newest project as having to do with global brain. So our project was called the Global Brain Institute, and then it ended, and then it was called Evolution, Complexity, and Cognition Research Group. And then this ended, and you know how it goes. So Weaver wrote a wonderful book which is called Open-Ended Intelligence. This book has become, or is becoming, more and more relevant and influential in the realm of conceptual philosophical thinking about artificial intelligence, which is general, in the sense of not goal-oriented. Yeah, so open-ended intelligence. That was the concept that Weaver introduced. We have been through many strange and stranger projects together. One of them, the School of Thinking, which was the educational project. But Weaver is also a co-founder of NuNet, together with Kabir Veitas and Ben Gorzo. So this is also a project that we work together. And Yip, let me see if I am able to pronounce your name. Yip T-Diep. Is it very much off? Yeah. Okay. I was trying to to learn. Yip, we have met a few months ago at the conference or symposium, which was called Beneficial General Intelligence Symposium in Panama. So you were one of the speakers, and this is like where I think, okay, we want this woman, you know, in the call. Yip is a CEO and the founder of JEDI, an organization with a beautiful mission, and the mission is to make peace more profitable than war. So I very much like, please do succeed, and we count on your mission success. And I'm kind of studying and watching you in different contexts. I understand that you are also, as everybody, it seems in this call, serial entrepreneur, and you have already been through some organizations and startups and so on. And you also are an educator, focusing, but not solely, but kind of like you have this interest in what you called women-centric education, which is an interesting term, women-centric education. And education interested in engagement in the blockchain space, yes, or like it's called space for some, like kind of like how to be engaged in blockchain and what we can do there. And I've been reading, you have an MBA, and you have McKinsey kind of pedigree, yes. So you are business educated. So welcome, and thanks for being here. I will not be introducing you that long every time. We will assume that in the second episode everybody knows us already, but let's have this moment of introduction. And my name is Marta Lenartowicz. I'm also based in Brussels. I mean, also like Weaver. And Michel is originally from Belgium, so there is some Belgian connection. Yip, we haven't yet signed you, listed you in our research center, but you know how such connections go. So you, like, I suppose that you are the least Belgian of all us at this moment. Not that we are very Belgian, but there is some Belgian predominance here. So I've been working for 10 years at CLEA, this research center where some of us met. And my angle was social complexity and social I'm interested in how social entanglements influence people, individual minds, you know, and intelligence. And I'm worried that kind of like not that great, like this influence, my worry is that, you know, when we become entangled in social patterns, the larger, you know, the weirder we become, you know, and I'm really interested in freedom of mind and creativity and so on. So I'm hopeful relative to this whole paradigm of decentralized, you know, decentralized everything, but decentralized governance as well. That this is maybe an approach to let individuals think, you know, and be kind of like freer. Yeah. And probably like if I was to nominate one illustration of what I'm like really interested in are those obedience or conformity experiments, psychological experiments, where people in the group, you know, like they see the length of the line, which is evidently, you know, like shorter or longer, and then they say the wrong thing against their like judgment because everybody else is saying. So I would like them to just speak their mind. That's my interest. I've started working at NuNet a few months ago, and my task is to develop a decentralized governance setup. And my kind of need for those conversations is coming from that that assignment, that I like having this kind of academic instinct. I really need to understand, you know, like what people mean when they say those words. And I've been researching, and I was listening to different people, and I thought maybe, you know, like it might be useful not only for me, you know, to clarify some terms and bring together different approaches and different types of know-how, and try to not only kind of like put it in one place, but also develop it, because from conversations there is development and so on. So if we are to talk about but before we go to the core question, is there anything you would like to say at this point, or introduce, like, you know, like correct my introductions or add something? That's nice.
No, I'm good. I'm eager to start with the conversation, you know, with a topic that you planned for us. And I hope you will prompt us like through with questions or theses that we can react to, so that, you know, we can structure the conversation.
Yeah. Yep, Weaver, anything you would like to say? Good.
I think this is genius. I can already say now, like iterative discussion of the same topic with the same composition of wisdom keepers is, I think, the deepest and most effective way to extract knowledge inside humans' heads. So I'm so keen on this experiment. Thank you for putting it together.
And thank you for saying it's an experiment, because yeah, it is. And like for me, this is a tested it's a well tested, and it's not only for me, it's basically for our civilization, I suppose. Yes, that out of conversations come understanding. Yes, and it's a different type of understanding than you know, like writing things down. But of course, it's an experiment in the sense that let's see how much coherence we can find, and how much incoherences we can actually kind of uncover and put forward, because there seem to like to be some, like at least to my mind. So since the focus and I will keep this focus really, you know, like really there, because we can go in many different directions. So for people to know what to expect from this series, if you are interested in decentralization of governance, for whatever, like from whatever angle, this will be the thread, yes, for all conversation. But I have proposed to you that we will land at this concept of decentralized governance only in the third installment, because there's so many assumptions already packed into this term. Like, for example, that whatever we are approaching from the concept of decentralized governance belongs to the realm of governance. Which then, if you look, it's like many different things, you know. So, so this is one assumption. Like, why this bundling together of many different realms? Yes, one is private, one is public, one is basically business, one is, you know, like it's many different things, but they are bundled together as governance. So this is one assumption, and basically for us today, before we go to the governance decentralization, the question of the day is like, what is governance? Yes, like what realm of activity do we address by this concept? And then we'll move to the assumption, which is interestingly kind of like almost hidden when we are speaking about governance decentralization. That, and maybe it's a wrong interpretation that the assumption is there in this way, but in my reception, when we are speaking about governance decentralization, there is a default assumption that governance is centralized, and this is the kind of like a shape that by default it assumes. So then what you need to do is to decentralize, yes? Or like, is it the case? Is it not the case? We'll move to that in the next conversation. So the question is like very simple, and yeah, we have 38 minutes. We can do it. Yeah. So the question is that, yes, what is governance? What are we talking about?
Maybe I can start.
Sure.
So I also speak French, and in French, gouvernance is related to the word gouvernail, which is the thing in the boat where you steer, right? The steering of the boat.
Mhm.
And I think in Greek it's the same. Comes from kybernetes, but I haven't studied Greek, so just from checking dictionaries a long time ago. So that's the way I think about governance. It's about decision making that is either collective or affects the collectivity. So that makes it for me very broad. Government is just when a particular group of people or a particular system is in charge of taking those decisions. But I think, when you take governance, it's very broad. It can be many, many different things. It can be legal rules. It can be like how I do adjust to your behavior in an open ecosystem. That's for me also a form of governance. So I unfortunately see governance as a very broad uh, topic
Mhm.
that affects the behavior of a collectivity or is taken collectively. But if you have a dictatorship, of course, one person can decide for everyone, right? So it's who is affected. I think governance related to steering behavior, to making decisions about behavior, about where resources will be allocated. So it's a very broad term for me.
So you put collective component as a part of the definition, but in respect to who is affected, because it can be that one person or like one thing is making the decision. But if the
No,
impact
I
is
wouldn't say
collective,
governance if it affects only one person. I would use governance for anything that is a society or a group or a corporate entity or a political entity. But I think it's not like just me taking a decision about going left or right. That's not governance. It needs to be like, okay, we are having a project together, and like, how do we make decisions about what we do? That is governance.
so there needs to be a social structure first, or social system, because if it was just
In
like a
my view,
crowd,
yes.
yes, if it's a crowd standing in the street and somebody says left, you wouldn't call it governance, yeah.
No, I wouldn't call it governance.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But
So
if it were no government, what would it be called, Michel? like that case of the group of people and somebody says left. And if we...
I would call it leadership or, something like that.
Traffic management.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
So this is interesting. I started to really to investigate. It's like the word governance is so given, and that we stop thinking about it. So at the moment that you raise this opportunity to enter into a discussion of what is governance, so I try to explain to myself what is it that I call governance. And indeed, I went on the same to the same initial resource about the boat and the steering device of a boat. And I wrote down quite a few points of what governance means, and I try to converge them into very like the primitives. What are the primitives of governance? And right now my list contains 3 dimensions where governance makes sense or makes meaning. And from these 3, there are quite a few others that are like branching out of this foundation. So it's really maybe the root is like the word steering, the steering of a system. A boat is also a system. And the 3 dimensions that I came up with, the one which is most familiar, which is really the closest to this boat and steering wheel metaphor, is governance speaks about how there is a system and how resources that are inherent or available to the system are being deployed towards certain goals or certain purposes. So this is one dimension, the dimension that connects resources to a direction, and this comes with the steering idea or word. So this is the first dimension. The second dimension is a bit more complex. I call it the one and many. Is how many, like a system, it can be a population of people, it can be a population of cells, it can be a pack of animals, it can be leaves on a tree. So it's really very broad in my mind, but how the many become or tend to become one, and how the one is being made into many. So governance also is involved in this. It's like relationship between unity and multiplicity. And of course, we can go through examples, but I want to be brief in this initial discussion. And the third dimension is what I called interiority and exteriority. It has many names. It's like when we speak about, for example, when we speak about a boat is in the sea or in the river or somewhere with water, yes. So there is a system, which is the boat, and there is an environment, and there is a relationship between the system and its environment. And the most basic, I believe, the most basic relationship between a system and its environment is the idea of boundary formation, the decision of self and other, and everything that comes out of it. So in this third dimension of interiority of exteriority, I have different names. I can call it also individuation, the individual and the milieu, boundary formation, but in the most simple manner, it's governance has to do also relationships between a system and its environment. So these are the really very basic dimensions, and from which we can branch. From each one of them, we can branch into different topics, and how more detailed understandings of governance are kind of branching out of these ones. So this is my first.
In this one and many, you are saying the governance is the function which is making this transformation. Yes, so it's the process that
yes. What is involved with our, like if we want to go in the street and talk, if I go too fast or I go too slow, we cannot keep our distance, and then we have to talk, and the distance also has to do with how high or low our voice is. And so if we want to have a conversation while walking, it's already one and many issue, and also of interiority and exteriority. So it already contains most of the foundational dimensions that I mentioned. So yes, it's also a matter of governance. And here, just to make it clear, through these three dimensions, there is nothing in these three dimensions that says that governance is central or distributed or decentralized or whatever. It doesn't have any assumption whatsoever of how this the regime of interaction is happening. Sometimes it's decentralized, sometimes it's hierarchical, sometimes it's flat. So this is already another layer of understanding. But I really like it to go from the very primitive things that you can say about it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can also compliment me, because I found only three dimensions. Like whenever we have an issue or a problem of one and many, governance will enter the thing. Whenever we have an issue of like managing available resources towards a certain purpose or a goal, again, governance is involved. And when there is the issue of boundary formation, and this consideration of, like, even when I think about me as an individual, the regime of interactions that I have with the environment versus the going-ons in my mind, the multiple voices that are there, and the actions that are being unified because I have only one body. So I can always operate my body as an integrated, more or less integrated entity. So again, it's a multiplicity and unity, interiority and exteriority, and resources and goal. Yes, I show just very quickly how these three dimensions are involved in any issue or thought or about governance. So of course you are invited if you have things that are not included in this. I believe it would be constructive, yes, to.
So let's hear Yip's take on this. What is governance?
I just have a lot of questions. The first one is, if we speak about steering, steering as a process of steering a boat, but the question is, do we steer a boat, or do we steer the relationship between the boat and the non-boat, like the boat and its environment? So that's already, for me, one question when we speak about governance. The second is governance a process, or is it a result? And if it were a process, is it always an active process? Or is it actually also an inactive process? So does it, for example, require us to actively take a decision? Or is it a result of an unconscious decision-making that is happening? Example would be the human body. Our body self-regulates the temperature. Our autonomous nervous system regulates our being. 38 degrees or whatever is the average body temperature out there without our active doing. And so would we already say that our body, or what in the body is governing us, is our autonomous nervous system governing us or not? So is that like body government? Like, does it require humans to have a governance? I think these were the main kind of questions I want to throw into the table, because fundamentally I agree with the definition that it has to do with steering, but then the kind of what is it that we're steering, and who is steering, and whether it's steering or the non-steering, which is what we would call governance. Why I'm asking these questions is because the answers to them might give us indications towards what at a later stage we might discuss about is what would be actually good governance or fair governance, or are these values of any relevance when speaking about governance?
Yeah. We have some things are repeating. So, for example, like if like it seems that steering, like it's the root of the word, so it's there, yes, it's steering, yes, and if you what you add this interiority and exteriority, and you are like kind of putting those things together. So actually the steering is some operation that creates this interiority and exteriority. Yes. So it's, as you say, it's steering the relationship between the boat and non-boat. Yes. So this is where this interiority and externality is actually emerging, yes, like out of this steering. Maybe I'm not sure, but you are somehow connecting those two things. And then what you seem to be adding as a necessary component also in saying that, okay, like the this body temperature, it's not really governance, it's yes, it's something else. So this multiplicity that you, Michel, said that there needs to be population, yes, and then this one and many is kind of like an approach how to understand this population, yes, that there is like a population becoming something one, yes, or some maybe one voice or the other way around. So there's some game on this multiplicity going on. And there was one more addition, resources, yes. So it's like population also, it's not only human population, but there's some things, yes, or some something to be, yeah. So it may be a population of non-humans, yes, that's also somehow involved. And I think it's interesting because like we started from Michel being cyber philosopher. Cybernetics is very closely kind of like coming into the picture, because the word governance and governing and so on, and the concept was much earlier in culture, much earlier, like kind of like culturally rooted, and people knew what governance is, and it was having to do with those social processes, yes, and it's and then only, like much later comes cybernetics and starts to see those patterns across different realms, yes. So the boat and thermostat and the body regulation of temperatures, then we start to speak in abstraction about those processes, and we kind of like decontextualize it from the human realm, yeah. So we try to take it back and say, okay, like where like is it also governance where the body does this, where we are steering the boat and so on. So do you see any consolidation or the other way around?
I'm just reacting to what Yip said. So by analogy, right, we could say that our body is a collective, has lots of different processes and a lot of different thoughts in the brain. And, so in that case, we could say, yes, it's a collective. And so it would apply to my definition of there is governance because there is a collective. And I guess I would tend to answer that the ego is like the governing, the conscious, the small part that is, that is conscious. It's the job of the ego to unify, and to have a sense of identity in these scales, because all these things are operating on their own, and a lot of it is automatic and absolutely outside of our consciousness. I remember reading this famous book, The Origins of Consciousness and the Bicameral Mind, which
Brilliant,
has
James, yes.
a great introduction to what consciousness is, and he's very clear that like a lot of things work better if it's not conscious, like learning to shoot bows, for example. If you think about it, it's not going to work. It's only if you don't think about it and you become one with the action, you become a really good shooter. Anyway, so I would use that analogy. I wanted to say one more thing, just by association. I'm thinking that, in a kinship-based society, a lot is regulated by custom, right? So it's a way to kind of minimize conscious governance by embedding, the maximum amount of things in custom, so that you don't have to think, you don't have to make decision. And I'm just kind of, okay, this is maybe anticipating some discussion we might have in the future, but I'm thinking about smart contracts, which of course is completely different, as also a way to, oh, let's have smart contracts, right? If X does this, then Y has to do that. So it's again this kind of idea is to eliminate tension of decision making, and that a lot of governance, might fall into that logic of how do we create processes, structures, institutions that take away the stress of decision making and make things like as automatic as we can. I don't know. It's just some idea that came up.
Yeah, I want to make a combination between some questions that Ip was raising and she just disappeared. And Michel. And what I was thinking is the relationship between the concept of governance and the concept of intentionality. And because I think that many of the questions that people was asking, and what you started to relate to, as things that are happening automatically and maybe without the intervention of consciousness. I would even leave aside for a moment this issue of consciousness and relate to something which is at least seemingly more simple, which is intentionality. So usually these two are going together. Where there is governance, there is an intentionality. And I agree that in many well-accepted understandings of governance, yes, it starts with intentionality and with a goal or a purpose. And I would say a goal, not even a purpose, because the homeostasis of the body is a purpose, but it's not a goal in the intentional sense. So it governs itself in some sense. So where do we begin with? Do we make intentionality as inherent in the way that we think about governance, or it's only a possibility of them coming together, while in general, governance is not necessarily intentional? And then, of course, it's for me, it again goes back to this one and many understanding of governance, because intentionality is either you have one that have the intentionality, or a whole population that's through a certain process reaches a certain unified intentionality. So how do you relate to this question?
if nobody says anything, I mean, but this is anticipating our discussion, about decentralization. But I think, when I mentioned the ego, um, it's the idea is if you don't have one, you're schizophrenic. And so it's like a necessary evil to have this kind of unifying process that is busy on having a narrative that makes a diversity appear as coherent. And I think it's just the same in society, is that over time we invented governance mechanisms to create more integration and unity over vast scales. So you can read human history as being initially, very small groups of people moving around, then having villages, small villages, tribal arrangements, and then empires, and now a planetary system of nation states. So the government is very much also, I think, related to that. And so to use Weaver's word, an intentionality of integration. And when it doesn't work, then you have disintegration. That's not the same as decentralization. Disintegration is when the groups fall apart and start fighting each other, then there is no governance at that point. So I think governance is, maybe in Yip's language, it's in a way a peacemaking apparatus as well. It's there to keep the peace, to create legitimacy of the decisions. And if you don't have the legitimacy, there's no integration, and then you have strife. Anyway, just a few thoughts.
I want to come back to this example that Michel brought at the beginning about that group that is there, and then Marta introduced the leader who just says go left and people follow. Because I do not fully agree with Michel here that this is not governance. Because I would even say, if you were to speak about that situation from a third-party perspective, at least I would say this situation was governed by leadership of a person who took over the steering of that situation. So I think when I think about governance, we need to add, and Weaver, I think, has brought it up already, that there are systems and boundaries, because we have to know what is the object of governance. So there needs to be some kind of relational definition. And then there should be also a time definition if we speak about intention or intentionality, because we need to speak about, was the intention there a priori, and who gave the intention, or where was this intention to be governed or to be subject to such governance given? Does it happen because I am this member in the group who is a child to parents that decided to give birth or live or raise this kid in a certain jurisdiction, legal jurisdiction that follows certain governance rules? Yeah, did I give my permission or my intention to be subject to this governance? If we call the nation state as the legal entity that is the object of governance, or do I break it down further and say governance can also be situational? Like if the segmentation of governance is situational, then governance can become a dynamic process, because disintegration of that situation, like the ending of that situation and dissolving of the group, would lead to a different way of, like, to a new situation that needs to be governed under a different level of abstraction. So I think the time dimension and the time dimension and the level of abstraction is important to define upfront.
I would like to
It's
add.
a good point. I just want to confirm. Yeah, it's a good point. And I think that you're right. And perhaps that person that Marta, mentioned is the one that created the unity in the mob, and therefore creates, the governance that wasn't there before by, like some primal action that, and I think this is also a very interesting process view is, things are always either integrating or disintegrating at some point, right? And so it's interesting always to know, is this a form of governance that is creating more integration, or, like we see today, we see our institutions more or less disintegrating uh, because of the particular conjuncture in which we are. And so, and governance is declining, I would say, or being replaced by something that is less integrative. But anyway,
very much like, like it's very complex, everything, like already, yes. And if you like in the context of this integration that you mentioned, the game of decentralization of governance is a very subtle game, yes. It's like really complicated, yes, because if governance is some creation of the integration or continuity, yes, like I would see if this person shouting left is actually governing in the next time steps, like 5 time steps, like what's happened next, yes, what happened next, yes. And if it consolidates into this one, like the many become one in some dimension, yes, some boundaries emerging and so on, that would be kind of like a proto governance, yes. But then, yes, it's in the next episode, like, or the next after that, yes, like this like if we define governance by some kind of integration, the decentralized like the motion decentralization of governance, kind of like paradoxical creature, yes. And like I'm trying to undo
it's like free jazz. In free jazz you have at some point the drummer will take lead, and then at some other point the saxophone, and yet it's a system, right? Even though there's no leader, there is at each time there's a contextual leader for a particular situation, but the system as such is still governed. It's not noise, it's music.
Yes, this really belongs to what you mentioned, Marta, is the many or the multiple become one. We have a word for it. It's called coordination. Yes, we coordinate multiples in order to become one, or something which is closer to unity than other situation, or the situation of disorder, which is like every component of the system does whatever, but there is not necessarily any coordinated activity. And I think something which is interesting in this and can lead us forward in the coming episodes is the idea that coordination actually requires limiting the degrees of freedom of the components of a system. Yes, it's when we speak of governance, we speak about constraining or limiting freedom. So these two are coming together. And when we speak about centralization or decentralization, a problematic that stands always in the background or implicit in this sense is how do we play, so to speak, with governance and the necessity of governance limiting freedom. And this is like the concern of centralization and or decentralization is somehow having to do with this, how we, and it's very nice that this free jazz or improvisation, this process of improvisation, which is very, very impressive human competence and capability, it's intelligent, is the way that like a few agents, it can be people, but not necessarily, that can play with their own freedom, constraining their freedom in turn in order to allow some kind of a coordination without like an overarching agency that imposes the limitation of freedom. So it's like a play freedom within freedom. Yes, you give up some of your freedom and then you gain it back. You play your part and then you give away your freedom for somebody else to play. And this is a very intelligent activity that humans are capable of doing, but not only humans. Yes, it's also a pack of wolves that is going for hunts, is operating strategies that are also quite, or dolphins. So I think it's a feature of intelligence, yes, this one, but it was important to me to make this point about the relationship between governance and freedom, and this is
Yeah, and it will be very relevant.
It's a problem for us humans to
extremely relevant for the talks about decentralization, because this is the motion. Yes, can we make those constraints into enablers? Yes, of like freedom, exactly that, and use those free motion as a mode of governance. You see, the time is passing super fast. It's time to wrap up this one. So, if I can just add like one paragraph. I think we have to factor in, because we do have a cloud of features by now, yes, like some of them are more repeating than others, but it's more kind of like a cloud of features of what governance entails. And I want to add one thing to that. I see it as arbitrary, this notion, you know, that some things that are following the descriptions that you have culturally are not called governance, but for example, leadership or management or whatever, you know, and so it's and there are cultural pockets where the word is used. Yes, it's like in political systems, yes, but not, for example, in family system. Yeah, it's for example in a particular dimension of corporate, we call corporate governance, but just go a little bit lower and you call it management. Yes, so but it's like you could say it's a similar process. There's shared resources, there's multiplicity, boundaries. Yes, Michel. And now you are muted.
Yeah, I just want to say that, and this is of course not in our case, but the reason the word governance has become so popular, is also political. It's very much related to neoliberalism. So it's against government, right? And so it's the idea that corporations could manage themselves and create stakeholder governance. The whole discourse about governance is very much suspect in many ways, because it was created in a particular historical context. But I'm just saying that this is not the way we use governance. We use it, I think, in the genuine and more generic conversation. But very often when we hear governance in politics, it means, oh, we don't want government, right?
Yes.
We want self-regulation, and usually it means corporate self-regulation.
Yeah. And then there is another packet which has to do with commons, and the word like is used there, which is like another cultural register. Yes, and they are kind of like interestingly meeting in weird combinations, and everybody has a different meaning of the word.
Yeah, and so the difference, I think, today, and this is when we talk about decentralization will come up, is that most people think markets and states, right, as governance institutions. And I think now we need to talk about market, states, and commons as three potential governance institutions. And so instead of a binary, we have to start complicating it as a trinity. And in every context, which one is the most appropriate hegemonic or dominant mix, part of the mix. And it sometimes can be government, sometimes can be the private. And in many instances, when you want to protect something, that would be my argument for our later discussion, it has to be the commons as a governance institution which becomes primary.
Anything you would like to add?
Yes, I want to make a quick suggestion, is that we open a channel on X if there will be listeners or viewers that will want to address questions. So just to create a perspective, if we have a prospective audience, to create some kind of a communication with them. So.
Yeah, that would be great steering, like a third party questions that we can contemplate on. I think my takeaway is for governance can only work when we agree to that government and behave according to it, that it increases our degrees of freedom rather than limits them. Like that's kind of my main aha.
I think that was a perfect ending.
You put
just
fanfares in the background.
zero when
Oh,
you
luckily,
finished your sentence.
luckily they didn't disconnect us. Yes, it's
Yeah, finish your sentence because it's interrupted you.
Oh, like the governance for me that I think hopefully somebody very smart will develop one day is the governance in which when we act according to the rules of this governance, that we multiply our degrees of freedom rather than limiting them. Maybe game theoretically, that is something that can be solved.
And I think it's worth remembering this question of freedom when we start unpacking the decentralization, because I think it's one of the most powerful reasons why we are trying to go for those setups in general. Yes. All right. So our time is up for today. So thank you so much. And this is to be continued. Yes, we'll start speaking about the shape of it, like why this, and what I'm particularly interested, like why do we mean centralization? Like how does it have to do with hierarchies? Is it like just the way of looking at it? If you look from one side, it looks like hierarchy. But you look at a graph or as a network, it looks like like centers, or like what's with the shapes? Yes, so in the next one, that's this is where
Thank you, Marta. Very interesting. Thank you, Yip and Weaver. Very
Thank you.
stimulating. I know it's your plan, but I'm gonna leave because my wife brought me food while at the end of the conversation, and it's gonna get cold, so I'm gonna have a meal.
Right. Yeah. So thank you.
Okay.
And we have the next one scheduled, so we see each other then. Yeah. So yeah.
Right.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Okay. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.